Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week I was lucky enough to chat with actor Joseph Culp. He's the son of actor and writer Robert Culp, and we talk about his lifetime of experience in and around the entertainment industry, his own career as an actor and everything from Roger Corman's Fantastic Four to the TV series Mad Men, as well as his new project, Welcome to the Men's Group, a film he wrote, directed, and stars in alongside such actors as Timothy Bottoms, Mackenzie Aston, and the always amazing Stephen Tobolowsky. We talk about how nudity plays into the film, the need for empathy in the world, and so much more. It's a wonderful conversation, and I hope you enjoy it.
Les, this is Joseph Culp calling from France.
Thank you so much for taking out the time. So is it dinner time for you there then?
It's not quite because we eat a bit later here, but it's about six, just after 6 now, and it's our appointed time. And
Thank you.
It's a relaxed Friday evening, and we're firing up the sauna, and so all's well.
I was actually just watching your video about walking in your shoes technique.
Oh, nice. That's the other thing that I do. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like it speaks to a bit. I watched the trailer and it looks hysterical for Welcome to the Men's Group. Can you tell me a bit about that project and how you brought it to fruition?
Absolutely. So, Welcome to the Men's Group, like a lot of independent films, started quite a while ago, meaning the inspiration for it, I'd say, was really over the last probably 10 years or so. My co-writer, Scott Ben-Yashar, and I were both involved for many years in something that's loosely termed the men's movement in the U.S. What that means is it started really in the sort of 80s and 90s when men felt the call to start coming together to explore their issues, to explore camaraderie, support, and in a new way that was more about feeling, more about reconnecting in a way to something that is very male, but not necessarily the violent side of ourselves. Let's put it that way. So to the more feeling-oriented part of being male. And these groups started springing up everywhere in the last 20 or 30 years. And I got very involved by the 90s because I felt the interest and I felt the need to connect with a group of men where I could share who I was and get their support and be seen in a way that probably I couldn't in normal life, and certainly in a relationship with a woman. Not that those aren't great, relationships aren't places where you get a lot of support and nurturing, but there's something about a group of men, and it's ancient, and I think it's largely lost in modern society, that is very important for young men and men of any age to feel that there's a sense of community, a brotherhood, something that makes you feel connected, and it's very special. That's what I have to say about it. It's very real. When a group of men get together and over time feel very safe with each other, they open up in really remarkable ways. And there's something about the truth, hearing a man speak from his soul, that is very inspiring, very restorative. So I was involved in that. I went to men's groups, I read literature, I really was passionate about it. And finally I met Scott in a group, and we were there for several years. And I remember one morning specifically, something happened in the men's group that was so inspiring to me, something between a couple of different men. And I've been making independent films for a while now, and I thought, I've got to do, if I only had a camera today, that's what a director often says, if I only had that camera and I could have captured what I just saw, people would not believe it. And Scott also came, I've been in the theater and movies and TV for many years. He was a long time ago, but he was interested, and so we started meeting and writing a bit, and eventually that turned into the screenplay. And it was always our intention to do it in a very sincere way, meaning that the movie would not be a satire about men, which is such an obvious choice. And yet, we knew that humor was really important. So even though we were going to talk about serious issues, humor had to be there, and we both have experience in common. So we made sure that the script had a kind of had both sides, the light and dark side of men. That it went into zaniness, that it went into depth, but also absurdity. All the things that, well, frankly, that I think men are. So that's sort of the genesis of how it started, and then comes the period of trying to find people to finance your movie and all of that. So, but we got it done, and now it is coming out on VOD on November 9th. So it's exciting.
Yeah, in watching the trailer, I was thinking that it's so easy to hit humor in the wrong direction necessarily for what you're really trying to convey. You go for the joke and kind of lose the moment, and so I was wondering if that was difficult, or I assumed it had to be a concern in the writing of, well, here's a zinger, but it undoes this character.
Yeah. Very carefully. We really, the script took a while to write, I'll be honest with you. Not because scripts are hard to write, but because we wanted to make it as good as possible and to convey the depths of meaning about this experience, which I think more and more men are having today. And I was very aware, too, that there's a whole culture out there of men's groups, and I didn't want them to be, I wanted to say, look, I'm one of you guys, I'm not making fun. The choice was, no, it's not about a men's group, and it's The Hangover. It's not, we're not going to go on a camping trip and meet up with hookers and rob a bank, It's like, it's not a movie like that. It really, that was the big challenge. It's like, well, what if the movie really is like the event of the group on one single morning in the life of this group? And that's what it is. When you get to see the film, you'll see it's not in actual real time, but it's practically. It's like a 4-hour period in the one morning of this group condensed into about 2 hours. And what happens to them in this house where they meet, and what happens around the house when things go off the rails. So you could say a lot was compressed. A lot of experiences we had, and some made up too, were compressed for meaning into this event. So yes, we wanted to be very careful that the laugh is right next to the wound. There's a painful moment, and then you take some of the ease off of that, but you don't destroy it at the same time.
Well, and you landed a spectacular cast. I imagine it had to be difficult sometimes just to not break each other in the scene or derail it. Stephen Tobolowsky is absolutely amazing. The whole trailer looks great.
Well, let me tell you about these guys. Definitely the finest cast I've ever had to work with. They were so committed to doing this piece. They loved the script that much. Everybody, when you're trying to cast a movie, everybody says, well, can't we get so-and-so, and can't we get that guy? And generally, if you don't have a lot of money, the answer is no, you can't get those guys because their agents won't even look at you. But we were able to bring in wonderful actors, and then we had to choose, and the ones that finally resonated so well with this material They all were passionate about it. It's as if they really wanted the experience of this movie, not just to do a movie. Believe me, they're indie films. You're not getting paid enough to just, it's not just a job. It's like they really had a taste for wanting this experience where we were going to be together in close quarters every single day and in each other's face. And something was going to happen. And everybody wanted that, like a pure acting experience. So you have Stephen Tobolowsky, who was the first guy I met for the picture. He read the script and he came in to meet me. And he says, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Are you kidding? What don't I want you to do?" And then Timothy Bottoms, come on, this guy's like a classic veteran actor from some of the most important movies ever, And he drove down from his ranch outside a Big Sur or whatever, and to meet with me, and I just said, "This, you gotta be in this movie." And each actor gave just everything to it. And I'll tell you, the only way we could have done the film was by their commitment, which means they were willing to rehearse like a play, and that's unheard of. Nobody wants to, I do that because I do theater, but nobody wants to take the time, and no one has the money for it. They knew. I said, "You guys, if you could do this, we do 5 days of rehearsal. That's the only way we're really going to be able to pull it off, because we have to be letter perfect so that we can run these long takes where we're all in the group together. We don't break the action. Everything plays out. And if we make a mistake, we can double back really quickly because everybody knows what they have to do." Mm-hmm. And that's, most movies and TV is not shot that way at all anymore. So it was this real sense of a live experience. And that, every actor, Mackenzie Aston, David Clennon, Phil Abrams, Terrence Vertolo, Ali Sam, myself, Stephen, and Timothy. That's the 8 guys. They knocked it out of the park, and I just feel very gifted that they did this film. Films are hard to get seen. They're hard to get out there without a ton of money, but this one will be there, and I'm very pleased.
Yeah, I'm happy in the last few years that VOD and even just streaming services that pick up films from festivals and whatnot have made some of these things not just hit a fest and vanish. Do you feel like do you feel like this was an easier time, or maybe a sweeter spot in history for trying to get an indie film scene?
No, I think it was probably one of the most difficult times. I'll be very honest. This film, I think, is, of course, I'm saying it, being the director, but, I've had the opportunity to screen it to a lot of audiences, and we've gotten amazing feedback, all in various countries. I've screened it in Europe. I've screened it all over the States, doing specialty screenings and little premieres, and the audience has been so supportive and saying, "My God, this is like a really fine film, and why, how are you going to get it seen? How are you going to get it out there?" And doing a theatrical release is very, very difficult. It costs an astounding amount of money.
Yeah.
And unless that's already built into your budget, which rarely it is, distributors don't want to put it up. They'd rather, go for the short run. And so I felt like I got to experience the difficulty of many independent filmmakers today, which is like, how are we going to get it seen? Well, the good news is that if you can finally, align with the VOD platforms, and then do some decent, push on it, people can get it immediately. The reason why a lot of filmmakers originally, I don't know, for me, you want your film in the theater, you want to do that traditional thing, but hey, that's really not, I've gotten to screen it a lot in movies, but that's not ultimately where we watch our movies today. And, so it works fine. And, but I, in answer to your question anyway, it's one of the most difficult times. And yet, if you can get it out there, everybody can see it. The whole world can see it.
Yeah.
And it used to not be that way at all.
Do you get different reactions in Europe to the movie than the States? I guess indirectly, I'm asking, do you feel like the issues in masculinity are different in the States versus Europe?
Interesting. I'll tell you what is different. I would say not so different that the interest in masculinity, or the new masculinity, let's say, about men who are willing to talk about their feelings and breaking the taboo of being men, which is what the movie's all about, that's pretty pervasive. I think that's the new world that's coming, particularly in the light of Me Too and Time's Up and everything else. Men are having to step up and redefine masculinity, and I think I've seen that in multiple countries. In the States, we're aware of it. It's still slow in coming in some ways, but I would say I found not a big discrepancy there. Certainly, there are some countries that we don't need to name that, being a man might still fall under, the definition of macho and all of that. Yeah. But they are all being challenged by the wider world, because we all know that those attitudes are changing. What does it mean to be a man? It's not the way it was for my father or my grandfather or yours. Mm-hmm. We are different men today, and we're obligated in a certain way. And I think everybody's more or less hip to that. What is different between the States and Europe, let's say, is nudity. Okay, because this film, you haven't seen it yet, but this film will brag to have probably the most full frontal male nudity of any film in modern history, in history of film, I think.
Tobolowsky gets naked in the trailer. He definitely tries.
He's on his way. Let's say that's the promise in the trailer, and I will promise further to that. That film, I like to say the film does go there in a very big way, and people are sometimes shocked when it does. It's absolutely in keeping with the story, but these men have to strip it back to the bare, primitive man. That's part of the theme of the movie, and they are told to do so, to get in touch with their inner selves and their primal selves. So you see some, flapping stuff going on there. And the point is this: when I screened it in Europe, let's say Norway, we did the Tromsø International Film Festival, we screened it in Germany, screened it in France, and Holland. Nudity is not considered to be very anything. Mm-hmm. It's quite European attitudes, particularly Northern Europeans. It's just nothing. Everybody's saunas, naked. It's co-ed. It's not sexual in any way. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah.
And yet, when I showed it in the States, people were like, oh no, how do I feel about this? I'm seeing penises on the screen, and it's kind of alarming. I wonder if I can get used to that. And what I realized was, yes, it's still true in a lot of our American sort of undercurrent. There is that puritanical thing that's still there. It's like nudity is a big deal, and it's a bit shocking, and it's kind of a shock to the nervous system of Americans when they see men running around naked on screen. It's a huge double standard, because of course we can watch naked women, running around or being murdered in any film, or raped or whatever, horrible things, and that's fine. But a man,
I still remember Dennis Franz with NYPD showing a butt, and all of America just lost its mind in the 90s.
I remember that. Wasn't that in Hill Street or something?
Yeah, it's I think NYPD Blue. Yeah, and that was just a man's butt. Uh,
You know, so that was something I really, you know, the Europeans find it amusing if a bunch of men are running around naked. The Americans found it a bit shocking.
mm-hmm.
And some loved it, and some said, I think you went too far. You know, they really couldn't deal with it. But, you know, that was part of the theme. The theme is authenticity in this movie, and so we do it in a humorous way. And, you know, Judd Apatow broke that taboo some years ago in a brilliant, brilliant scene with Jason Segel in, I think it's Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Yes.
Where he's weeping naked with his penis out, you know, and it's just the most incredible scene.
Incredibly vulnerable moment.
Of comedy I've ever seen. It's just like, I couldn't believe he did it. And I thought, well, he's now raised the bar, you know. So, and what was it? And in Captain Fantastic, Viggo Mortensen displays at one point, and he goes, "What? It's natural," you know. And Timothy Bottoms called me after he saw that movie, because we were still in post-production, with Viggo Mortensen showed his dick, you know, and so he beat us, man. And I said, no, we have 8. We'll never be beat. We'll never be beat. We have 8. So that's a promise, and you can look for when is that going to drop in the film, you know.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, there's something that I've heard more and more recently is that, you know, with Me Too and Time's Up, that it's great that men are recognizing that there's a problem, but I don't hear a lot of suggestions as to what to do, how to be men differently, or how to shift this culture and not just keep training more of it. And when I think about going, you know, getting a group of guys together to go primal, I worry that without doing it very carefully, no one's going to find empathy at the other side of that, and it's just going to be a terrifying mob. Are there things that you do or are mindful of in men's groups or in your walking in your shoes empathy technique to try to avoid kind of a Fight Club problem, or like the incel community started out so positively and then just went so off the rails?
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I don't see it happening in these groups that I'm referring to, and that this movie is based on. I really, there's so much. Well, you know, there's it's such a culture of empathy and compassion and support that I don't see it. They don't turn into, what shall we say? You know, there's a distinct difference between
devolve into a
movement,
machismo, yeah,
machismo thing, or you know, the thing that actually is a real problem, and that is groups of men that have gotten together that feel somehow disenfranchised by women.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Politics or whatever. And they've even been termed the men's rights movement. And they talk a lot about, you know, they're kind of angry is what they are, and they're afraid. And so they do a lot of, it's very critical of feminism. It's very non-supportive. I would even dare say it turns into something like a hate group. And this is distinctly different from the men's movement. Very, very different. Groups like the Mankind Project, Men's Division International, these are very far-reaching groups that are about values such as brotherhood, compassion. In fact, let me just put it this way, they were inspired, all of men's movement groups essentially were inspired by feminism, which means in the 70s when it all kind of started and women were becoming more empowered with feminism, and women, men started, the first fledgling group said, well, how are we going to meet them? You know, how are we going to be better men? Well, how do we do that? And so they began to form, in groups, and sometimes they were therapy groups, sometimes just communal support. And then a whole culture, kind of bloomed out of that, which Robert Bly took up in the 80s and 90s. The great poet Robert Bly wrote a book called Iron John, all about men owning their grief, and he used poetry and myth-telling and storytelling, all of which is in the movie. So it's a very distinct culture, and it really, though I think it's a legitimate fear that women might have, and some men, like you get a group of men together, and violence may not be far behind, which is traditionally true. And so we are experiencing, what shall I say, a kind of new definition of that. And it's quite the opposite. It's where men are encouraged to get into feelings, to get into combating their depression and suicidal tendencies, because, that's the biggest killer today. Still, of all suicides, it's men who don't talk about their feelings, men who go into depression and live with it. This is the greatest percentage of suicides today, and always has been, much, much more than women. And it's and so, I just think that the men's movement is certainly, obviously, I'm very supportive of it, and I think it has much to teach us. I don't think it's going to devolve into, these hate groups or whatever. There are going to be some out there, but they're not part of what I'm talking about. They're in fact clinging to some old perceptions about things.
Yeah, it seems like you can't function as those groups do with empathy, and that
it's not really part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that the focus on empathy that you have both in the groups and in your acting technique. That's just something I discuss quite a bit that the world could use more of.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very much exposed in film, because what you see in this movie, by the way, Welcome to the Men's Group, is a group of men who are not, as I often say, they're not perfectly evolved guys in our whatever that new age term might be. It's like they're trying to do it, and they're kind of getting there, but they make mistakes. They get into arguments. They lash out at each other. All of those old. It was very important for my partner and I to put that in the film, that this did not all go well on this particular day. The values are in place. They have a manifesto about how they want to be, and they're brothers. But, stuff comes up. You're talking about real things about your lives, and people get critical, and there's conflicts. But what happens is ultimately they find a way through it. And it's that effort of finding a way through it with empathy, ultimately, that makes them the new males, the new hope of men. And empathy is, without questions, I often think it is maybe the new dimension, that we need to enter into. You mentioned the walking in your shoes work that I do. That's a technique I actually developed many years ago, and I still use it and teach it and do workshops in many parts of the world. And it's really using your body to feel empathy for another person or any given subject. And that empathy is a kind of knowledge, it's a kind of knowing. And it's almost like these workshops are practicing empathy at a very high level. So I'm very much excited about that. I want to see a world that is living more from its empathic human gift than it has in the past.
Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking out the time to chat with me about it all today. I could talk to you for hours, of course, about your dad growing up writing and being on I Spy,
Well, if you have any questions on that, I can do that. Yeah, there's other stuff about Joseph Culp. Yeah, who is this guy? Yeah.
I'm sure I'm going to have some nerd friends that are going to not believe I didn't just talk about Corman's Fantastic Four with you, but honestly, I watched the trailer for Men's Group, and it looks amazing.
Well, thank you, and I'm excited for you to see it very shortly. It'll be coming out soon. Yeah, you can always. I'm always happy to talk about Doctor Doom and Fantastic Four and my dad and all of my history in Hollywood. It's fun stuff too, But I really appreciate that you wanted to hear about the film today, because this is my new offering and it represents a lot of work. So I'm excited that the more people are going to start seeing it.
Well, thank you again, and yeah, I'll certainly reach out. I'd love to do another interview sometime and delve into the past a bit.
Anytime. Did you ever see Doomed, by the way?
No, I was watching the trailer for that earlier, and now I'm going to have to go watch the Corman documentary. That looks great. That's
great. It's a really great documentary by my friend Marty Langford. It's one of the most unusual stories of Hollywood you've ever heard. The story of that movie that was just, made and became more popular by it not being released than if it had been, probably.
Yes, I think you're right. It achieved a cache of cult status that it might not have had in theaters.
Without a doubt. It's a great documentary. Go check it out. And make sure to see Welcome to the Men's Group.
Yeah. Hopefully the sauna's nice and heated up, and you can go have a great rest of your Friday night.
Hey, thanks a lot, Les. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joseph. Bye.
Okay. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener-supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/TVDudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter @TV Dudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV Dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.